Good morning. There are so many values and virtues that guide and inspire our lives. And where do they come from? Our parents, educators, movies, books, experience? Interestingly, different people place greater emphasis on some values than do others. For some it's sacrifice, for others confidence, and others dare with bravery. Inspiration, which guides and directs our choices, comes from so many sources. My conviction is that much of this inspiration comes from childhood books and the heroes and heroines that we adopt as our own. For instance, when I look back at my early years, two books stand out, Gone with the Wind and Green Gables. I'm convinced that had I not read those two books, I would not be the woman that I am today. Both books had incredibly strong female leads who did not let anything defeat them. Whether being an unwanted girl orphan or a survivor on the losing side in the Civil War, neither Anne nor Scarlett would give up. And they were true to their values and to those for whom they felt responsibility. These two characters convinced me that women could do anything, be anything, if you just worked hard enough and believed in yourself. I wonder where I would be today if instead I had bought into the message of and been influenced by Cherry Ames, a series aimed at young girls which I also read. Cherry was a nurse. The books began with her as a student nurse and worked their way through nursing stints in the army, department store, camp, flight, jungle, and so many other scenarios in 27 volumes. They were fun mystery stories, but did not inspire me to become a nurse. Nor did Vicky Barr in her 16-volume series as a stewardess. She didn't lift my goals skyward to join her, as she put it, as a proud possessor of a career in the clouds. Those were not the books that captured my imagination and got me to identify with them. But I wonder sometimes, what if they had? In retrospect, I credit those books which did grab me for my independence and persistence and the conviction that anything can be overcome if you work hard enough at it. The book that has had the greatest influence in my life is sadly lacking in the details and personalities and lifetimes of the characters and left more questions than answers. And that book was the Bible. It all started with a children's version with lovely pictures and stories reduced to simple homilies of love and courage, which proved a super introduction to a loving God. But then my grandmother decided I should take up her practice of reading a chapter of the Bible each evening, beginning with chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning. And with that, I graduated to the King James Version of Bible lore. And with that came all the challenges of reading the stories in a 17th century dialect and trying to relate to the new stories I kept discovering that didn't seem to correlate at all with the happy children's version with which I was familiar. I mean, what do you find loving about God in being turned into a pillar of salt for looking back at your home one last time? Or God letting the man who most loved him to be tested and tormented by the devil? Or that ghastly horror story of the Levite abandoning his concubine to the mob, and then after she was raped and killed, cutting her up into 12 pieces and sending them off to the tribes of Israel to come and join him in the revenge killing of a nation? Definitely a far change from lions purring at the feet of Daniel or Jonah happily exiting the whale and the animals in contented pairs on the ark. Another thing I found challenging to come to terms with was the many women of whom stories are told, but who lack names, which makes it far harder to identify with them or know if there are other stories that also involve them. There were the women who went out in pairs to prepare the way for his teachings, the woman at the well, or the woman who anointed Jesus' feet with her tears. Names are important. They are how we remember and call out and differentiate those we know from the stranger we have yet to meet. Well, with a first name like Nola, you can imagine whatever I did, it got attached directly to me. How I had wished for a name like Mary or Elizabeth or Vicky when I was at school. There were so many of them that their misdeeds got confused with all the others. But Nola. When I first went to work, I used my second name, Susan, to have anonymity. But then I discovered that wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And so, back to Nola. Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus had names and great stories. But I admit my sympathy always lay with the hard-working Martha. So completely, in fact, that I named one of my daughters after her. She was practical, and while she probably lacked imagination, but Jesus and the disciples needed to be fed and clothed and accommodated if they were to complete their mission. And it's the Marthas of the world who made that possible in a practical sense. I've always been convinced that while Mary sat at Jesus' feet, Martha, laboring in the kitchen, had a loving ear attuned to the teaching going on in the next room. Martha's sense of duty overrode her ability to sit still and to learn from the Master. Lydia is another of my heroines. She was a businesswoman, the purveyor of purple cloth at the city's gate. She believed in Jesus, had her entire household baptized, started a home church, and welcomed and financially supported Paul and other missioners. She clearly had determination, faith, and knew how to get things done. But my greatest favorite is Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, the woman who Jesus first appeared to after his resurrection and who he sent to bring the good news to the apostles. Mary was a faithful follower and supporter of Jesus in his lifetime, standing beside him in death when the other disciples deserted him. She remained, and first at his grave to prepare and anoint his broken body for burial. And yet, Mary, this central figure, disappears from the Bible after that. So disconcerting. Where did she go? What did she do? I find it impossible to believe that the one to first see and speak to the risen Christ would just have gone home after that and resumed such a forgettable life that no one cared to record it. But all we have is stories dreamt up by others in future generations. Her alleged gospel doubted, and only a few pages remain. Besmirched by Pope Gregory I in 591 as a repentant prostitute or promiscuous woman, it was only in 1969 that Pope Paul VI removed that identification. But the damage had been done, and for 1,400 years her image was commemorated in great masterpieces of art, depicting her as a brazen harlot. For me, Mary Magdalene represents the ability to remain faithful, despite persecution or the opinions of others, the confidence to do what you know is right, without regard to the prejudices or disdain of others. A very useful virtue in this world of ghosting and cancer culture and the woke folk. And yes, when you look at those who have most influenced me from the books that I've read, it's the stories of women that resonate. Logically, since I am a woman. We all need role models, whether in the real world or the world of fiction or the stories of our faith. We find inspiration in those with whom we can identify and emulate and copy. This doesn't mean that men have not inspired me with their deeds or courage or love. It just is a lot harder for me to see myself in their boots and deeds. But the world is changing. My mother, born in 1905, was a teacher, her two sisters, a nurse and a secretary, because these were the options on your way to becoming a wife and mother. Women could not be priests when I was settling on a future career, despite God's calling. It was only on the 30th of November in 1976 that the first 6 women were ordained in our Canadian church. Today, few doors are closed to women in the West. We just need to grasp the opportunities, be the pioneers, and learn how to fail, and then get up and carry on once more. And we need to encourage our sons and our daughters to look back at those who influenced them and provided them with the inspiration and identity and learn to identify the difference they made in one's life. For the next generation, we need to provide the books that will provoke their imagination and inspire their confidence and share their dreams. For now, a great challenge is to explore with those you love their heroes and heroines. You will learn a lot about both of you and discover how differently we see values in the broad variety of characteristics and dedications in those we seek to emulate. Reviewing my own choices, I was surprised and disappointed to see that none of the characters I greatly admired could be said to represent kindness, empathy, patience, fairness, honesty, or gratitude, to name just a few. Inspiration is to be found in the characters found in so many unexpected places, from the little train that could to the Bible. And we all need to be inspired and find models and values that give life standards to live by and to judge our own performances against. Too often we read only of the bad guys, the scandals, and the exploiters online and in our newspapers. We all need a good dose of the good, and it is in our heroes that we are blessed with that opportunity. Scarlett O'Hara was no angel, but she convinced me that I could overcome anything to which I set my mind. And it's largely worked for me. I don't particularly like Scarlett as a person. I'm not sure that I would have wanted to be her friend, but I am so glad that I met her through the pages that Margaret Mitchell penned. I hope you will spend a few moments revisiting your books and nodding a thank you in the direction of the authors, the books, and those characters who helped make you the person you are today, and who gave you standards to aim for and solace when you failed. Do share the ones who stand out in your memory, for good or ill, and may they continue to influence your todays, and remember them always. So may it be. Amen. Books, are so available today. Bookstores, the local thrift shop, your local library, at no cost, accessible through your computer to read, or even books that read themselves to you. There really is no excuse not to go back and meet up with old friends or make new ones. After all, there are few things as enjoyable as stretching one's imagination into the world of another's creation and meeting fascinating people there as well. Do let me know the books and characters who have influenced your life.